the richest and most powerful country in the world, signaling that they will get as many Bitcoin as they can, as fast as they can, which triggers the whole game theory about nation states. Once large nation states with vibrant economies and strong geopolitical influence do that, it will trigger the kind of FOMO we cannot imagine. We are left behind as we were with internet, with AI, with so many technological revolutions. We will feel our fate as an open air museum. We are really closer to its end than what most people think. We see that our economy is collapsing. We just hit a record in bankruptcy. Our debt is out of control. The government expenditure in the GDP are 60% of the GDP. So it's the same level as in the USSR in the 70s. 40% of the working age population is working for the government. We don't have energy security, and the cost of servicing the debt is getting out of control. I don't see a painless way out of this crisis. I could make the case that in 3 years' time, the euro will be past history.
You studied data science and then you worked like a little bit, like 4 years into that. Has that influenced how you look at Bitcoin? Or
yeah, I discovered Bitcoin through data science, but in a kind of serendipitous way. I was working at Oracle back in the days, and basically I was interested in a software licensing problem that some software distributor have with on-premise software. And I stumbled upon a thesis of computer science written by some guy in Australia, which basically explained that you could use Bitcoin underlying technology to solve this problem. And that's how I was introduced to Bitcoin in the first place.
Interesting. So that played a big role even in discovering Bitcoin for you. How's that influenced your thinking of Bitcoin? Maybe different to other people?
Yeah, excuse me?
How like I think like data scientists are really looking at problems in a different way when you look at like data and you look at the actual facts versus maybe less emotional to that sense. How is that influenced how you look at Bitcoin, how you explain Bitcoin, how you see Bitcoin?
It's a good question. I'm not sure it has had that large an influence. Because when I discovered Bitcoin first, I didn't understand it really well. Like at first I was drawn to Ethereum because it was like more user friendly, more general purpose and stuff like that. And so I must confess I didn't understand like the whole game theory, monetary economics, history of money, financial history that helps you understand the role Bitcoin has to play. That came after, and so my Bitcoin journey in itself was more on that plan. Like I understood Bitcoin well once I got interested in economics, history of economic thoughts. After I've read some Australian economics, and this kind of knowledge helps me discover Bitcoin. And so I understand Bitcoin through this lens more than data science, I would say. My data science background was rather helpful to use data to write about Bitcoin and to analyze it. Both from an on-chain analysis perspective and also from a pure, let's say, mathematical finance perspective.
That's super interesting. You said that you got into Ethereum more because it had a better user interface. how was that? Like what was better on Ethereum for the user interface?
So when I entered this space, so just after leaving Oracle, it was like 2016, just after Ethereum ICO, and there was a lot of marketing material out there. It was also at that time that you had the Economist edition about like the blockchain, the trust machine, all the bullshit around like blockchain technology. So back in the days, if you were a young guy such as me, looking info about like blockchain technology, most of the results you would get would be about like decentralized applications, smart contracts, and stuff like that. And once the first Ethereum clients were available, it was like easy to use, even for someone like me with not that a good technical background, in the sense that I was like more doing mathematics in data science. I'm not a developer by formation. I was in business school. So I guess due to my limited technical background, like Ethereum was more appealing. And it's only like 18 months later, once I had difficulties wrapping my head around some simple concepts about how market works, especially in the context of like decentralized financial application, tokenomics on Ethereum, and stuff like that. And so I decided to basically self-educate in economics, in finance, and in economic history. And that's through that lens that I understand that, yeah, Ethereum was kind of clunky, not sustainable in the long run. And at the opposite, like Bitcoin was there for the ages and solving a real problem that you can miss at the beginning, of course, but that is way more important and that has way more chances to succeed than this kind of vaporware description of a world computer.
Interesting, yeah. For me, I was a little bit in shitcoins and it was a little in altcoins, but I was like, this doesn't make sense too much. But yeah, I quickly got into Bitcoin only stuff. What are your thoughts on then on things on top of Bitcoin? We have, for example, ordinals, but there's a lot of other things that you can put on Bitcoin that kind of have altcoin vibes, I would say, but on top of Bitcoin.
So the way I think about it is like, is it sound from a technical perspective, and is it like a good use case? In the same way that you would analyze a company, for example. Of course, it's different, but you can use the similar frameworks. And my contention with most of what is developed on smart contract blockchain is that it scores bad in both dimensions. In the sense that, technically speaking, most of the time it's not secure. It's presents with lots of attack vectors, of ability to manipulate. And when it's successful, it bloats the chain because it's a trade-off, right? Either you have something that is easy to use and anybody can develop its own smart contract, its own shitcoin, but at the end of the day, you will have so many transactions eating the chain at the same time that you will have scalability issues, which can only be solved at the ground layer by centralization. And that's why after Ethereum, all the smart contract blockchain that emerged to compete Ethereum were more centralized. You can think of BNB Chain or Solana, for instance. And on the like business model and utility front, I think that basically most of what remains, most of what still has traction in these ecosystems is what we call DeFi. And to me, it's neither decentralized nor finance, in the sense that finance at its core is a function of intermediating savings and investments. And to do that, you cannot step outside contracts, property laws, and stuff like that. Because if, for example, I have savings and I want to give them to an entrepreneur that will use them to build a business and generate productivity and maybe give me a return, then we had like 250 years of institutional contracts emerging from the social order to protect the investor, to align interest between different shareholders in this setup. And basically, the whole idea of DeFi and tokens and stuff like that discard all of that, which is completely, it's hubris, and then it's kind of stupid, because if we invented these institutions in the first place, that's because they are really helpful. and really useful to avoid, for example, entrepreneurs getting capital and being liquid from day one and just deciding not to build anything because it's easier for them to get rich by marketing what they will do instead of really doing it. And even if they are successful, we have this thing called corporations with accounting practices, with stocks, with different seniority on debt instruments and stuff like that, that basically structures the claims of different investors within a corporation. Whereas when you hold a token, you have no guarantee that the success of your business will directly translate in financial success for you. So all in all, I think there is great things to develop on top of Bitcoin to facilitate some kind of financial contracts. But I would discard the idea that we will get rid of the whole financial system because of it, because we will still need capital allocators, intermediaries to do that, some kind of trust, and at the end of the day, we formed institutions in the past to do that, such as the rule of law and all the institutions I mentioned before. And I don't see that disappearing. But if you look at different constructs, for example, like money market fund, basically a money market fund for your audience is something like Tether. It's like a fund that will take your dollars, invest them in short-term treasury bills, so the most liquid and safe securities out there. And the only job of the fund manager is to make sure that it stays on par, meaning that the liabilities are less than the assets, that the share issues worth each $1 are backed by the corresponding amount of dollar-denominated securities, which is exactly what Tether does. In a money market fund, though, the shareholders get a return based on the underlying securities held by the fund. And I think, for example, the future of stablecoin will be something like that. For example, you can imagine some construct whereby you issue tokens or cryptographic signatures or some kind of e-cash mint, whatever the construct. And on the other side, you have a blend of on-chain Bitcoin associated with Bitcoin short position, basically derivatives, making them at par with dollars and reaping funding rates rewards, because when you are short Bitcoin, basically you are facilitating people wanting to be long, and because more people on average wants to be long than short Bitcoin, they have to pay you for the privilege of getting that exposure. And so that way you could recreate something that already existed in the fiat traditional world, that is battle tested, that serve a real purpose in the financial system, that really has value, that really has use. But you can leverage the Bitcoin network such that this kind of product inherits some of Bitcoin desirable properties, such as it's auditable directly on chain. You don't have to trust an intermediary. You can do creation and redemptions automatically without going through an intermediary. So it's also censorship resistant and such kind of properties. Also, it can be cryptographically managed, so it's more efficient than human management. So it's kind of a long answer, but that's my 2 cents on DeFi.
It's interesting. The thing that you said in the beginning was really true. The only DeFi is Bitcoin. The only financial system that is decentralized is Bitcoin. The things that we call DeFi, as you said, are not decentralized. Maybe have something to do with money, but not really.
Excuse me to interrupt, but I will even contest that. The kind of light bulb moment I had when I understood that DeFi on other chain wouldn't work was the moment I understood that all finance is based on money. So you have to have an endogenous money on your network that gains value for its characteristics as money. And then on top of that, you will have the liquidity to build more complex financial contracts. Whereas on smart contract change, they tackle the problem backwards, where they try first to develop utility for financial contracts and stuff like that. And thereafter, they notice that, doesn't seem to work well because our underlying token is not really money, by the way. So yeah, let's wrap Bitcoin, which is real money, on our network in order to be able to do more interesting stuff, which is kind of an admonition that they didn't tackle the problem in the correct order.
How will that look on a Bitcoin standard? Do you imagine some money markets native on Bitcoin, some money things natively on Bitcoin, maybe even like a stock market natively on Bitcoin? How do you see that in the future?
Oh, I'm sure about that. I even wrote an article for Axiom BTC, which is a Bitcoin-only venture capital fund created by Alan Farrington and other Bitcoiners, where I explain exactly this kind of construct, which I call Bitcoin Money Market Fund. And my thesis is that it's one of the way we will get towards the Bitcoin standard, because it's a way in which Bitcoin is poised to monetize some asset classes, especially fixed income, because the kind of value that are seeking like fixed income investors is not quite addressable with Bitcoin right now, even though like what Michael Saylor is doing could be a good counterexample to that. But in the sense that most fixed income investors are seeking like stability with higher than inflation returns and really low risk, which is something that is better delivered with this kind of imaginary construct I put forth, a Bitcoin money market fund, than with Bitcoin, than with being long Bitcoin itself. In maybe like, for example, 5 to 10 years, when volatility will be much lower in Bitcoin, I would have a different opinion. But to bridge the gap, to go from where we are now to there, I think there is a compelling argument to make that Bitcoin could monetize in different ways. Some people would like to hold Bitcoin directly because I understand that, the returns are really worth the volatility. And some others that maybe are not Bitcoiner, for example, you can imagine, for example, a big pension fund that has a huge liability problem, especially in Europe, for example, because of demographics, low growth, and stuff like that, unable to get the returns it needs on the fixed income market, just tapping into this kind of fixed income market on Bitcoin to get the desired return. So they don't necessarily need to like Bitcoin or being Bitcoiners, but the incentive structure is such that, in my opinion, they will do it at some point. Another example could be like sanctioned countries. If you are, for example, Gazprom, one of the biggest company in Russia, which is like a partly state-owned gas and energy company. They have like financial dealings and operations across the world in different currencies with bank accounts across the world. But now there are sanctions because of the war in Russia and the sanction we enforced on Russia, on Russian residents and Russian companies. And so if I were, for example, a CFO at Gazprom, I could totally like try to convince my board that the safest way we have to hold dollars now is hold some kind of dollar proxy in a Bitcoin money market fund, because that way the Federal Reserve, the DOJ, and any other Western institution cannot prevent us from using it, especially in international trade. And funnily enough, this is kind of what Putin said recently in an interview, where he demonstrated that he kind of gets Bitcoin in the sense that it's censorship resistant, it's not going away, and so people will use it because they have a use for it. So yeah. Sorry, I forgot your initial question.
My initial question was just about how the money market funds, stock market, all the financial system will look like on a Bitcoin standard.
Yeah, and also, so I think like you will have this kind of construct, but as we get closer to hyper Bitcoinization, I think they will slowly fade away for the simple reason that most of our financial system is, as any financial system, as we said before, is built on money. And our current fiat money is also built on the promise of inflation. So that's the reason why we have so many fixed income instruments, so much debt, and so little, in some sense, so little direct equity holdings from people in corporations. And as many other Bitcoiners, for example, I think the most well-known for this position being Safe Dynamus, I think that Bitcoin adoption will create some kind of re-equitization of the economy, whereby people will be slowly decentivized to take on more debts and to issue debt, because it will be quite a dangerous proposition to issue debt on a Bitcoin standard. But if I want to have like some exposure to a business because I believe in the business model, the entrepreneur, whatever, it would be a better bargain for me to just be a direct equity investor, because that way I have basically the same downside, because either the company fails and it won't be able to reimburse debt in Bitcoin, or it succeeds and then I also get a share of the upside and not a fixed return, the fixed return I would get with a fixed income instrument. So in a nutshell, like changing the incentives change the behaviors of financial market participants, and especially issuers, because they have to cater to what investors demand. And I don't see investors demanding that much fixed income on a Bitcoin standard. So that would be that. And also I think regarding like the stock market, that at some point we will have like stocks denominated in Bitcoin, balance sheets with Bitcoin ROI. At our company, at Bull Bitcoin, that's already how internally we do financial analysis. Like we don't care like what's our growth margin in fiat, what's our cash flow in fiat. We don't care about that. We only try to measure how effective we are at investing capital in order to get Bitcoin returns, and obviously being able to beat just a long idle position in Bitcoin. And regarding the trading of stock itself, I also think that maybe some construct on top of Bitcoin, some stuff like sidechain, like Liquid, can help clean the current market structure. Because now, like to try to convey my point, you have to understand that when you trade securities now, they are listed on a specific exchange, like for example, the New York Stock Exchange, and everything is cleared centrally at this institution. And that's basically that's opens the way to stuff like high frequency trading, whereby the closer to the settlement layer, the settlement server you are, the better you are able to front run other traders and basically taxing them for nothing, and living upon the value created in the economy, but contributing to nothing. Whereas if, for example, you have a settlement that is done through a side chain, for example, as Liquid, with maybe also confidential transaction and stuff like that, this kind of free rider behavior are not possible anymore. So marginally speaking, there are these kind of perks that we can unlock once we get a good money. We can leverage its native programmability to build like financial markets that are like better in the sense that incentives are better aligned between like issuers, traders, regulators, and stuff like that.
That's super interesting, especially when we think about how the world looks on a Bitcoin standard. And I think that will be really interesting to see. But you said you're also in the company, Bull Bitcoin. You measure your success in Bitcoin. So you measure the revenue in Bitcoin. You measure when you do investments, how many Bitcoins did you put in, how many Bitcoin you got out? Like how do you do that?
So basically, we do like normal accounting, like regular accounting, but we also express it in Bitcoin. Like it's just a different spreadsheet, basically. And you don't see the thing through the same lens because, for example, if we were not good at our job, we could like just have a growing revenues because Bitcoin price is ripping, and whereas when you measure it in Bitcoin, you are truly measuring your own ability to allocate capital properly in order to get return. Because like it's so easy to beat the hurdle rate of fiat in some sense. Just buy stock and go to the beach, like just buy an S&P 500 ETF and go to the beach. And that's the core reason why our economy is broken. And so kind of our way to, because we are all kind of on a Bitcoin standard in the company, we understand that it's not satisfactory to only measure our success in this stupid measure system. And so we also try to look at it that way. And the way you can understand it is like, if, for example, we decide to invest money to develop a new product line, we will measure the success of this product line very simply by saying, like, we invested that many Bitcoin to develop it, and then it hit the market. Maybe we had customers because they like it, and we generate revenue. And if in the long run the revenue exceeds our cost in Bitcoin terms, it was a good use of capital. If it's not, it was not a good use of capital. And so it gets you back to economic calculation, which is basically the essence of capitalism and why it works. And even at the micro level of a company, I think it's really helped you steward your company towards way better decision making, because in some sense, you won't dilapidate your capital that easily on frivolous, useless thing. Each time you make a decision, you really think hard about, like, what's the opportunity cost? What are the risks? What could we do that is better with these Bitcoins? And it totally changed the way you operate as a capital allocator.
It definitely will change a lot. And it's also interesting for me because this year is the first time where I get paid in first year where I get it paid in Bitcoin. And it is probably frustrating to see how little your revenue will grow in Bitcoin terms, because you really have to level up your game massively to get more paid in the next year than the previous year. So that will be really interesting, and that is probably also interesting for a company to see as a motivator. It's like, oh, I want to beat the Bitcoin income. If you just measure it in US dollar, yeah, of course you can, like, you probably grow your income. If you have the same dollar revenue this year than last year, you lost. But if you have the same Bitcoin income than last year, that's quite good. Like that's like 2x in US dollars. Basically, that's a really good success story. But in Bitcoin terms, you have to really look at how many sats are you getting per month, and is that the same amount or more than you got a year ago? It's an interesting. Using Bitcoin as a unit of account is kind of a superpower to your company, and you also to your personal life. Like, just even if you don't get paid in Bitcoin, you can convert it directly into Bitcoin, or at least the amount that you don't need, and see, like, okay, the amount that I don't need on a monthly basis that I can directly exchange for Bitcoin. What is that in Bitcoin terms? And is that amount growing or shrinking in Satoshis? I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. And it's probably really motivating for people to think about that.
And it makes me think of two things. Like it's a good example because it also shows you that we can like explain Bitcoin growth in price by two dynamics. The first one being like it's just less inflationary, so it's better money, it's better at holding purchasing power over time, but also it's an adoption. Like it follows like the classical like S adoption curve technology. If you look, for example, at the number of non-zero addresses on the blockchain and you compare it like to different technologies and stuff like that, you will see like this kind of exponential growth. And as more people use Bitcoin, it also gains value because it's a network good. So the more people use it, the better utility you have for it as money, as a spending tool, as a unit of account, and stuff like that. So of course, because we are in the early days still, I guess, this kind of adoption is quite stiff, and it's for like just employees, for example, it's really difficult to grow your cash flow and productivity as fast as the adoption. But once we reach a larger adoption, of course, the rate of return will slow, and I think it will be easier to achieve what you described. And the other thing I wanted to add is that basically what you described is a corollary of economic calculation, but for like employees incentives and career management and stuff like that. And I think Bitcoin companies, at least at Bull Bitcoin, we are finding out that operating on the Bitcoin standard also change a little bit the way we think about like employee-employers relationship, about like incentives and fixed salaries and stuff like that. For example, I think like many people will like having like a salary expressed in fiat. And as you mentioned, the downside of that is that like, especially during bull market, they will get less Bitcoin each month with the same fiat salary. But they could also, like, if they are talented, if like they are really needed by the company, they could also leverage this position to ask for bonuses directly in Bitcoin, or for an interestment on revenues and stuff like that. And in that sense, your wealth is also growing with the company. So as long as the company does a good job to earn return on Bitcoin, as we mentioned before, and as long as you are really providing value that is difficult to replace to your own company, it's something that you will be able to monetize for yourself and get more sats out of it.
I partnered up with Coin Vigilante. This is the most beautiful Bitcoin timepiece that I ever saw created by anyone. Look at that beauty. I love it so much. Coin Vigilante made a perfect Bitcoin watch. That's the perfect, subtle, elegant way to go out there and show that you are a Bitcoiner. And that watch brand is Bitcoin only. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there, and of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece, and make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. If you watch or listen to my podcast on a regular basis, I guess you already bought some Bitcoin. And now the most important step is to keep the Bitcoin. Keep them secure in a hardware wallet. My personal recommendation for hardware wallet is the BitBox. It's super secure. It's simple to set up. It's also a perfect gift for a friend who has still their Bitcoin on an exchange. And you can get a 5% discount with the code Robin at the checkout. Visit bitbox.swiss/Robin to get your BitBox. And the next step is to really level up your sovereignty as an individual. You have to have the most secure self-custody setup. You have to secure your own devices. You have to protect your privacy. You have to set up an inheritance plan. And depending on where you live, you even want to have a plan B, a citizenship where you can move in case something goes really, really wrong. And through all those steps, the Bitcoin way is guiding you through step by step. And if you visit thebitcoinway.com/partners/Robin, you even get a 30-minute free call to find out how you can level up your sovereignty.
Absolutely, and we should strive to get more sats. Really cool. What are your thoughts on this year? It has been crazy. This episode is really close to the end of the year already. I can only recap really quickly with like ETF halving, 100K, Trump is like the four highlights that I see right now. What are some of your highlights this year? And how did you see this year?
So yeah, a lot of things happened this year. I would also maybe like mention Seyr going like full steam on his speculative attack. Maybe also like as we discussed before, the comments of certain head of state, especially Putin, like that like just changed the Overton window regarding Bitcoin. And maybe also what happened with the Samurai developers, which is, in my opinion, really important for the future of Bitcoin and open software in general. And maybe lastly, also like the generally speaking, the macro situation with like the world clearly breaking into two poles. And one way to look at that, it's like it's the perfect environment for Bitcoin, because first, as you mentioned, we have like the richest and most powerful country in the world, just like signaling that they will get as many Bitcoin as they can, as fast as they can, which kind of triggers the whole game theory about nation states. A topic that has been discussed in Bitcoin circles for years, and that always seemed kind of pie in the sky for outsiders. Like many people, I tried to explain this idea that once like large nation states with like vibrant economies and strong geopolitical influence do that, it will kind of it will trigger the kind of FOMO we cannot imagine, with the kind of money that is difficult to grasp. And it's funny because as we are recording this, just yesterday, I saw some German parliamentary in the Bundestag just saying, what are we doing in Europe? We should like follow the US, because if they do that and we are left behind as we were with internet, with AI, with so many technological revolution, we will basically just seal our fate as an open air museum. Like in some sense, like Europe is becoming like what Venice was when the center of the world was shifting from Renaissance cities to Amsterdam, for example, or to the New World. And at exactly the same time in France, we had, so not in France, in the European Parliament, some French political leader, Sarah Knafo, gave quite a good speech expressing the same ideas. So you really see that like what Cynthia Loomis and Trump discussed and announced in the US is kind of triggering a lot of reactions. And yeah, it will be really, 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 I think, fun to see in 2025. And regarding like Michael Saylor, the ETF, and all that stuff, it has been commented a lot, so I won't add anything quite new. But I think first it will warm up a lot of different folks to the idea of a speculative attack. I've long tried to, I spent quite some time trying to guess who would be the next Michael Saylor. I'm leaning towards Larry Ellison and Oracle. First, because it's a company I know well because I work for them, but also because it's one of the only large technological company in the world where the founders still have a lot of control on the company, because he's still almost majority shareholder. I think he owns like 41% of the company. Also, the guy is crazy, so he's in the sense that he's able to think out of the box. He's a mentor of Elon Musk, so maybe there is something will happen in their personal relationship here. And Oracle is basically generating cash like few companies are able to do it, and they are always buying back their stocks. They have been doing that for years and years and years. Only I think like I calculated recently, I think over only the last 3 years they bought back something like $80 billion of their own stock, which is a kind of ludicrous amount. And it's a company that also have little avenue for investment to grow, because in some sense they are rent seekers, like they live on software that they have licensed decades ago, and that it's like basically impossible to not use as a company, and they are quite bad at competing with other companies on different line of products. And so getting back to the ETF and stuff like that, I think also I hope it warms some people up to the dangers of centralized custodian, because as we speak, Coinbase custody is holding the keys of something like 13% of all the Bitcoin supply. And I'm not quite comfortable with that. It's not me saying is ETF are bad, Michael Saylor is bad and stuff like that. It's not me saying they should taking self-custody, because at the company level, and when you have the kind of mandate that you have when you are an asset manager issuing ETFs, it's really difficult to do, if not impossible. But at least I think it should wake some people up to the importance of self-custody, which is something really dear to us at Bull Bitcoin. Because at the end of the day, if we understand that the purpose of Bitcoin is separating money from states, if we replay gold's story through basically the 15th to 20th century, meaning that for practical reasons, we decide to give it to custodians because it's just easier for us, then it could also become captured in some way, shape or form, maybe not to the same extent than gold was, but it surely will. And I can really see a kind of bad future and a sad future in which Bitcoin became adopted really, really quickly by people just here for the fiat gains and getting exposure through MicroStrategy, ETFs and stuff like that, thus increasing the holdings of Coinbase. And then some government institutions, stuff like that, just saying, okay, now you will just create a settlement system, a centralized settlement system on top of that. You will give us access, you will give us censorship rights and stuff like that. And then maybe some of us, because we hold Bitcoin directly in self-custody, we know how to interact with the network, to use it properly, we can have some financial sovereignty. But for most of the world population, it won't be that way. And in that scenario, I think we failed.
Interesting. So in that scenario, you think Bitcoin will fail? Or
Bitcoin and also Bitcoiners, because it's only my opinion, but to me, it's our job also to kind of warn about this kind of dangers. And at the moment, some of us are speaking their minds about it, some more than others. but the large majority of people describing themselves as Bitcoiners are just cheering up for numbers go up. And I think that at the end of the day, if the dystopian scenario I described plays out, we will have some part of responsibility. But I mean, like, it's not a fatality, of course. Many things can change, but maybe this will be understood the wrong way. But in some sense, I will not cry if, for example, one of these institutions, be it MicroStrategy or iBit or ARC, I don't care, gets rug pulled soon by Coinbase. Like, because it could, like, in my experience, people understand danger when they get hurt. And just saying to people, yeah, it's kind of dangerous to create such a honeypot. But once you get hacked or rug pulled or stolen or censored out of your holdings or stuff like that, it becomes way more practical and obvious to you. So yeah, it could also change the way we think about this stuff.
Interesting. And also what you described earlier is super interesting, kind of the kick-off of the global game theory. America, I think, probably moves really good now into Bitcoin. Let's see what Trump actually does. We have smaller states like Bhutan, El Salvador, which is interesting to see, but not as important, of course, because of the size as Europe or America moving in a big way, but they're not moving that fast. Now, as you described, the finance minister of Germany, that was the finance minister for the last 4 years. Yesterday, literally, was his last day of being a finance minister. All of a sudden, he discovers Bitcoin and talks about Bitcoin. He had now 4 years the chance as the finance minister of Germany to make something with Bitcoin and do something about it, but he didn't. And also the 50K Bitcoin got sold. I know it's not on a Germany level. It was like a Saxony level, so it was like on a smaller level. But still, I think the finance minister probably has some influence also there. And now all of a sudden, Bitcoin hits 100,000 in euros. Now all of a sudden, he is no longer in the office. Now he talks about Bitcoin. It's funny how this works. But yeah, I do have hope for Europe to also kick off the global game theory, because I would like for Europe to have a lot of Bitcoin and not just Russia, the UAE, America. Like, Europe should not completely sleep on that trend. And
Excuse me, I agree with you with some caveats. Like, I'm more interested in European plebs getting Bitcoin. Whereas what's happening right now is that, like, our political leaders are FOMOing and starting to understand that they will be left behind if they don't wake up. But I don't see that quite in the general population, especially, at least in France, in my home country. I don't know how the situation is in different European countries. And I think, like, there is a case to be made that like, Bitcoin is, like, open to everyone, something like it levels the playing field between, like, individuals and structures of power. And so, like, it would be better in my mind if there are, like, many individual and corporation holding Bitcoin when we reach the point where countries are really stockpiling Bitcoin for strategical reserves and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually wrote a small tweet about that the other day when MicroStrategy didn't buy the Bitcoin, and I basically said, like, oh, it's good news. We want to have Bitcoin and not the big corporations. They don't need Bitcoin. And in the same sense, is a good news of Germany selling their Bitcoin and not holding on to them. The one thing I will say about that is it shows a little bit of what the overall adoption rate is, how politicians talk to a certain extent. Not always. In Canada is probably also a good example where politicians are really not liking Bitcoin, but I think there's a shift coming in Canada, especially with the next year.
It depends. If you look, for example, Pierre Poilievre, he has spoken highly about Bitcoin in the past. He seems to get it, at least to some extent. So yeah, things might change. And also, I would add, like, I think there is some quite overlooked region in the world where the line will shift in a big way over the rest of the decade, which is the whole axis between basically Istanbul and Jakarta. So the Indian Ocean, like India, Indonesia, the south of China, the Middle East, Azerbaijan, all these countries, like they have like on average like 10% growth. They are like creating a new middle class in about 10 years. They will have the kind of the same purchasing power as some small Western economies. And the fact is that financial institutions there are really bad, that people have a culture of not relying on government because of their past experience. And they all have smartphones. They are all eager to adopt new technology. And they are not like woke. Like they really are driven towards like the kind of materialism that we had like a couple of decades in Europe, where they want like a better way of life, a better financial standing, better material conditions for their family and stuff like that. So I could also make the case that a lot of adoption on the ground will happen there. And also I should have mentioned that at the beginning, we are talking 4 billion people. So in terms of like getting Bitcoin in the hands of people, I think that's the most untapped reservoir of potential plebs. Especially also because most of the national currencies in those countries are terrible. If you look at Turkey, for example, I think there are many Bitcoiners there, and most statistics show that, which can also really easily be explained by the fact that the Turkish lira, is one of the biggest shitcoin out there, and there are already a lot of mechanism for financial repression in Turkey. Which is, to me, the best environment possible if you want your population to adopt Bitcoin, because it's just outline its value.
Interesting. Is 2024 kind of the start for the official start of global game theory for nation state adoption? Do you see that like that?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe also it all depends on the US, because all we are discussing starts there. It's like this kind of domino effect of Loomis and Trump getting together and saying, yeah, we will do that. What happens if they don't do it? What happens if they do it, but I mean, it's the government, like if, for example, they do it, like, let's say they buy like 1 million coin, as they said, they propose in the law, over the next 18 months, then they get a financial crisis for some reason, and they decide to sell it all to rescue financial institution, to pay the debt, to do whatever bullshit politicians are always doing. I mean, what happens with like the country that have FOMO'd with them? Will they align and also sell? What will they do? I don't know. And I think like it's like game theory is dynamic, like you could also like imagine that if, for example, like all the West follow suit with the US, and that, for example, like a large chunk of the Bitcoin supply ends up in the hands of like Western ETFs, corporations such as MicroStrategy and sovereign states in the West, how the East will react. As we mentioned at the beginning, we are gearing up toward a different world order with I think an obvious break from the world we used to live in, especially with the BRICS forming their own camp. How will they react in this scenario? And also, like they have been spending like 20 years to try to get out of the dollar, of the US dollar, and doing like summit over summit over summit, discussing like, yeah, let's use yuan, let's use renminbi, let's use rupee. But at the end of the day, they are just like rediscovering the problem of double coincidence of want, because they are essentially proposing using like some fiat money, so debt, from a sovereign to clear debt with another sovereign, which I mean, like the Indians will never accept using Chinese money. So, for example, but you could use many different examples. If they try to settle in gold, it will be a logistical nightmare to just do clearance in gold. And in the same way, then the Indians won't accept using yuan. They will never trust the Chinese for like gold certificates or to just believe that the gold is indeed there. So maybe they have more reasons than Western countries to use Bitcoin as an instrument for international trade. And then you also have the idea that the way our supply chains are right now, for all the talks about friendshoring and stuff like that, we still need some trade between the East and the West. And how will they exchange value? Like through the US dollar and SWIFT? I don't see the Russian doing that anymore. Neither will the Chinese. Maybe the Indians, because they play on both fronts. But I think like if like some like French corporation, for example, needs to trade with like China or Iran or Brazil or I don't know, or Russia, or Bitcoin is the best tool to do that. And I think that would be even more bullish if we start seeing this kind of stuff. It will be even more bullish than national strategic reserve in the USA, for example.
Interesting. What do you think has to happen that the fiat system is kind of bending the knee to Bitcoin? Right now, I would say the fiat system is still like in control of everything, and Bitcoin is just poking small holes into that system. What do you think has to happen that the fiat system kind of is going to its inevitable ground, or do you see a fiat system vanishing over long period? Obviously, we talk about long periods of times here, but what has to happen? What events are you looking at that could trigger that?
So first, I think we are really closer than to its end than what most people think. Let's take the euro, for example. As we speak now, my home country, France, presents with 6 to 7% deficits. This is like completely crazy. Like it's almost unheard of from OECD country outside of a sovereign default. Like it's the kind of level you had in Greece and Spain during the debt crisis in 2010, 2012. Currently, we don't have a government. President Macron appointed like a prime minister 2 months ago, something like that, even less. It received a vote of no confidence from the parliament. Now we have another one which is not really popular. This is like an old school politician that like gets there through inertia because there is basically nobody. So here at home, we see that our economy is collapsing. We have like we just hit a record in bankruptcy. Our debt is out of control. We have like the government expenditure in the GDP are 60% of the GDP. So it's the same level as in the USSR in the 70s, which is kind of crazy. I think it's something like 40% of the working age population that is working for the government. We don't have energy security. And we like the cost of servicing the debt is getting out of control. Public services are collapsing. Like everything is like following the gradually and suddenly pattern. Like I explained in an article like 6 months ago that we will have this kind of sequence of events. Of course, I didn't forecast it that precisely, but I was still able, and it's not my job, I was still able to say, okay, so we are in debt, so it's the debt holder that will decide our politics. It's like you can go to you can vote now if you want, but it won't change anything. We have no painless way out of this financial situation and stuff like that. And I mean, currently the situation, just to explain to your audience, is like France has decided to live beyond its means for ideological reason, and we are footing the bills to other European countries that are less ill-managed because of the common currency. I don't see like the Germans or the Dutch accepting that for too long. I don't see a painless way out of this crisis for France. And so I could make the case that like in 3 years' time, the euro will be past history. What happens to financial markets? What happens to our economy? What happens to fiat? What happens to do we get back to national monies? If like we were to reintroduce a French national money now, it would have like something like maybe 15% inflation due to our situation. How the population will react? Will they still ignore Bitcoin? I don't think so. How the state will react? They will go full steam with financial repression, capital controls, and stuff like that. Obviously, they will see savings, pension plans, and stuff like that. So if you look at past examples of failing countries, hyperinflation, sovereign default, and stuff like that, it's always the same thing, gradually and suddenly. And most people, they don't understand it before it's too late. And so I think that the kind of the game theory we are talking about is more like we are in the accelerating phase, where the fiscal situation in the West, especially, and also in China, is so dire. Like we have so much debt and so little real productivity. And we have been in this situation for decades now that we cannot just kick the can down the road without implementing real drastic measures. And I mean like kind of almost totalitarian measure whereby you don't have any financial liberties anymore. And so in this context, I think Bitcoin is a tremendous exit option. It's like we as Bitcoiners, we understand that already, but I could definitely see like adoption just picking up steam in Europe because of the macroeconomic situation I just described,
Is it a good idea to flee? When I hear that, I really get scared of Europe and the situation that is kind of evolving. should we flee Europe? Like as Bitcoiners, is that something that you're like, oh, maybe it gets bad for us Bitcoiners if the euro crashes and Bitcoin rises massively? Government has to get money somewhere. I mean, Bitcoin is probably the hardest place to get money out. It's probably easier to get it out of houses and real estate taxes and pension funds and all those things. But are you afraid of living in Europe as you live in France?
Not really. And I would say, to answer your previous question, it depends on your situation. If you are married, you have kids and stuff like that, which is not my case, maybe living is a good idea, because anyway, like even if things get better, it will have to get way worse before. And so I'm not sure it's like the best thing currently, for example, to raise a child in France. Just look at our educational system. Like it has becoming a machine for churning out like morons, totally ideologically brainwashed by like woke culture and neo-Marxism. If you are young, and you can like experience financial sovereignty because you know how to hold and use Bitcoin in Europe, my advice would be to stay and fight, because at the end of the day, it's not only just saying like, okay, let's adopt Bitcoin and stuff will fix themselves. There also is a need for education, for different propositions for new forms of institutions, of governance, and also we need like social bonds at the local levels and stuff like that. So if to use a popular phrase, if we want to build Europe back better, we need talent here also. But if you want to like thrive in a collapsing Europe, you will need like the kind of resiliency that you could only have in certain like social, economical work settings. And of course, Bitcoin helps tremendously in that way, because it will help you dodge some of the worst flavor of financial repression I described. It will also give you a peace of mind that you will need to avoid like getting like trapped in the whole like political discourse and stuff like that. Like people around me, they are all expecting like a savior, you know, like they are all expecting a political figure emerging in France and cleaning up the country, such as Milei is trying to do in Argentina. I don't think it's a good idea to be expecting. We should try to do what we can at our own level, which for some will be huge, which for others will be small, but everything is needed. And in the same way, I think like there is some merit in just like being here in the trenches to try to save as many people that want to be saved, because some they just don't want. And so we will still need like Bitcoin podcasts. We will still need like companies such as Bull Bitcoin to give a gateway to people. We will also need like tools. We will need people like teaching basic stuff to help like newcomers understanding the situation and understand how they can contribute to just make the situation better. And like we need all of that. So I wouldn't say that like leaving is automatic, but I would definitely like encourage some people to consider it, because you don't owe anything to your state. Even if you are like really, for example, I really feel like I'm French. I really like my culture. I really like my country. I don't see myself living elsewhere. I like the food here. I like everything. That's why my thinking is more like just like let's get rid of the parasites and the government. But apart from that, you don't owe anything to the French state. You don't have to stay here and just finance their bullshit and suffer from their policies. You can definitely like go to a country that will respect your natural rights more and develop your life there and just be happy. Like you're only how to say it in English, your only like duty as a human being is just that.
That's a beautiful way to look at it. It's a beautiful way of like you should leave if you really want to, and if you like maybe also have kids, especially if you raise kids here and stuff like that. But yeah, there's also something to it of fighting for your country, of like trying to save the people of Europe and not Europe itself, like save the people here. I like that a lot. That's very cool, really cool.
Do you know the abduction of Europe?
The what?
The abduction of Europe.
Abduction. I don't know the word abduction.
Abduction. It's like kidnapping.
Oh no.
So it's a painting by Rembrandt. It's originally it's from Greek mythology. It's a myth from which the name Europa of our continent come from. And basically, it's this Phoenician beauty called Europa that enchanted Zeus, the king of the Greek gods. And to try to seduce her, it transformed into a magnificent bull and came down to Phoenicia and lured her into climbing on her back. And then he brought her to Crete, where he was like in Greece, and it's like, for example, to us, it's a powerful myth, of course, for bull Bitcoin coming into Europe, because it's exactly that. Like, we just want to like have have bull Bitcoin coming into Europe in order to give the means to people that want to restore Europe back to its glory, to just do that, starting from their own individual life and self. And we need people to do that. But I mean, for many people, it will be just better to live and to build their life elsewhere in a better setting.
I love that. Really cool. We have one question that I asked each and every one of my guests, and the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
Wow. Complicated question. Let me think. I have an article I've been working on for quite some time now, but with all that's going on with bull Bitcoin, I don't I hadn't the time to finish it sooner, but I will publish it soon, I think. And basically, it's kind of a long article, but if I try to break it down, basically, it's an overall critique of the efficient market hypothesis, which is one of the building blocks of modern financial thought as it is developed in academia and taught in universities and used in financial models on Wall Street and stuff like that. And as Bitcoiners, we have done tremendous work to criticize methodologically Keynesianism and Marxism and different economic thoughts. And as we mentioned at the beginning of this interview, once we get to hyper-Bitcoinization, we will have to build a new financial system on top of Bitcoin as money. And I think if we build it with the principles of modern financial theory in mind, modern financial theory is a whole like set of financial knowledge, let's say, that is built on the EMH, the efficient market hypothesis. And basically, if we build upon that framework, it will be totally dysfunctional because this theory is, I would say, at least as stupid as Keynesianism. And basically what it says, like it holds that market gyrations, like volatility in financial markets, is the product of like Homo economicus, you know, like this kind of utility discounting machine that you find in mainstream economic textbooks, always reassessing the fundamental value of securities in the light of new information that is hitting the market. And so to them, it means that markets are linear systems, only moved always in equilibrium and then moved out of equilibrium by like rational agents using new information to gauge the value of financial securities. And the consequence of that is that markets are random. So that, for example, like volatility in Bitcoin tomorrow is independent than volatility in Bitcoin today and of yesterday's volatility, which is another way to say that financial markets have no memory. So a lot of things to unpack here, but all these hypotheses and all these results basically can be criticized both from an empirical and statistical standpoint, but also from a logical standpoint. And they are like on the outskirts of academia, let's say. There are like researchers using different mathematical tools, different hypotheses, trying to explain how financial markets behave using tools mostly stemming from physics. And it's some stuff that are really not well known, maybe as was like Austrian economics 2 decades ago for most economic students. But I think these tools are way better to make financial decisions, basically because they are built upon a way better understanding of what financial markets are and how they behave. And so, yeah, maybe that is something that could interest folks into Bitcoin and that they could discover by reading this article. I don't think it's something they would find elsewhere unless they are used to read like financial research papers and stuff like that.
That's super interesting. Please, when it's out, please send it to me. I think that could be an interesting article. Yeah, thank you so much, Theo, for sharing that with us. We have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And your question from the previous guest is, if you were tasked with creating a Bitcoin security checklist for someone just entering the space, what are the 3 most important things that someone has to do?
Wow, it's a really good question. 3 things, security checklists. So obviously the first will be like just get a hardware wallet, like a battle-tested one. At Bull Bitcoin, we have a preference for Coldcard, but I know it's not that frequent in Europe. I also really like BitBox. I think like the user experience is really cool. I mean, some of Ledger products are also nice, although I would advise against using them in conjunction with Ledger Live, which to me is not a good piece of software. Also, maybe if you never used it, try Sparrow. If you want to like have a desktop wallet that is like really secure and also like really flexible in the sense that it allows you to really see what you are doing in terms of interaction with the Bitcoin network. I think it's a really amazing piece of software, and in conjunction with a good hardware wallet, it's one of the best setups you can have. And so that's two. And I think maybe in terms of security, more generally speaking, I think it's a good idea to try to redevelop relationships, whether it is with other plebs or with your local communities, because if shit hits the fan, that's where your food security will come from, for example. That's where many other kind of security could come from. So yeah, I would say get a hardware wallet. And if you don't know how to use it, which one to choose, you can always go to Bull Bitcoin. One of the things we do is like free education. Try Sparrow. It's the best desktop Bitcoin wallet out there. And I think like your first experience with it can be a little bit difficult because it's not really user friendly for noobs, but it's also like it also has all the functionality you want, and it doesn't compromise on security, on privacy, and stuff like that. And because it's really descriptive, you can also understand better how Bitcoin works, the different scripts we have in Bitcoin, the different transaction formats, what are UTXOs, why it is important to consolidate UTXOs and stuff like that. And yeah, last piece of advice, just like create like good social relationships with people that you know you will spend most of your life with, because in my opinion, most of our security and generally speaking quality of life comes through that.
I love that. Really cool. Thank you so much, Theo. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask your questions, and reach out to you?
So yeah, you can follow me or just interact with me on Twitter at Théo Mogenet, TheoMognet. Or you can just like you can try also our European platform with Bull Bitcoin that will be live when this interview is out. And like if you have any question with the platform, with anything that you need to have a good Bitcoin journey, don't hesitate to use our chat. There is always a human behind with deep Bitcoin knowledge that can answer your question. And yeah, generally speaking, you can also follow us on our different social media accounts. So at bullbitcoin _ or at bullbitcoinfr if you are French and you are listening to this. And yeah, basically our content is mostly Bitcoin education and memes. So it's always interesting to get. It's also always interesting to follow also maybe Francis Pouliot, our founder, if you don't know him, one of the most interesting guys in Bitcoin. Yeah, and that's all.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your invite. It was a blast.